Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, where I continue coverage of justice for George Floyd and the trial of Derek Chauvin. I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi.
And Melissa and Brooke, they're out today.
On today's report, we discuss the role of Black millennials and Gen Zers in the fight for racial equity, equality, and justice with Dr. Wendy Osefo and Brianta Maxwell from the Black Millennial Convention. Also, civil rights attorney Sue Robinson is back to give us an analysis of the trial of Derek Chauvin, and we have an update on the police killing of Daunte Wright.
Plus, we continue our discussion on the Black church's role in social justice and advocacy with Pastor Michael J.T. Fisher, pastor of Greater Zion Church Family in Compton, California, and Pastor Michael McBride, director of urban strategies for the Live Free, Live Free campaign. We have all that and so much more, so if you're ready, it's our voice and our truth. Let's get it.
To me, this reeks of conflict of interest.
Do we know if he actually waved a gun? We only hear one side of the story.
This just really did make me feel good that the justice system did what they needed to. We're going to keep following this story, and we will have the latest for you.
Soulmates, we have an update on the fatal shooting of Daunte Wright. 26-year veteran Kim Potter of the Brooklyn Center, Minnesota Police Department was identified late Monday as the officer who fatally shot Daunte Wright, a 20-year-old black man, during a traffic stop in what the police chief called an accidental discharge. Potter, who is 48, has served as a police union's president, the Star Tribune reported. The former officer gave her resignation today in a brief letter to Brooklyn Center Mayor Mike Elliott and Police Chief Tim Gannon. Gannon followed suit, announcing his own resignation later that day. Meanwhile, City Manager Kurt Boganese was fired. Now, Boganese said Monday that the officer should be given due process after Mayor Elliott said she should be fired. The city manager has control of the police department, but Elliott said the city council voted Monday to give the mayor's office command authority. Protests grew outside the Brooklyn Center police station Monday as hundreds gathered despite a 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew imposed by Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. We'll have more on this story right now.
So, former President Barack Obama, he said that the U.S. needs to reimagine how lawmakers and law enforcement works following the death of Daunte Wright, who was shot by a police officer in Minneapolis suburbs on Sunday. Wright's death occurred at the same time and in the same area as the trial of former officer Derek Chauvin, who was charged with murdering George Floyd, whose death sparked protests and riots across the country. The former president said the fact that this could happen, even as the city of Minneapolis is going through the trial of Derek Chauvin and reliving the heart-wrenching murder of George Floyd, indicates not just how important it is to conduct a full and transparent investigation, but also how badly we need to reimagine policing and public safety in this country. Wright, 20 years old, he died after a police officer shot him during a traffic stop. Brooklyn Center Police Chief Tim Gannon on Monday described the shooting as an accidental discharge. He said the officer intended to reach for a taser, but mistakenly grabbed her service weapon and fired a single bullet. On Monday, Representative Rashida Tlaib said Wright's death wasn't an accidental discharge because wasn't an accident because policing in the U.S. is inherently and intentionally racist. Tlaib appeared to then call for an end to law enforcement entirely. She said, no more policing, incarceration, and militarization. It can't be reformed.
Well, President Joe Biden said Monday that he has seen the fairly graphic footage of police fatally shooting a black man during a traffic stop just outside Minneapolis, and that he is waiting to learn more details about the incident. Take a look.
Floyd, buddy, I told you a moment ago that I'd comment briefly on what happened in Minnesota last night. We've spoken to the governor, the mayor, spoken to the authorities there, and I haven't called Daunte Wright's family, but our prayers are with their family. It was really a tragic thing that happened. But I think we got to wait and see what the investigation shows and the entire investigation. You all watched, I assume as I did, the film, which is the body cam, which is fairly graphic. Question is, was it an accident? Was it intentional? That remains to be determined by a full-blown investigation. But in the meantime, I want to make it clear again, there is absolutely no justification, none, for looting, no justification for violence. Peaceful protest, understandable. And the fact is that, we do know that the anger, pain, and trauma that exists in the black community in that environment is real. It's serious and it's consequential, but it will not justify violence and or looting.
Police shot and killed Daunte Wright, who was 20 years old, in the city of Brooklyn Center on Sunday after pulling him over. Brooklyn Center Police Chief Tim Gannon later described the shooting as an accidental discharge and said the officer who fired intended to use a taser, not a handgun. Well, let's start with the former officer, Kim Potter, okay? People are outraged. They're upset. She's been on the force for several years. We're talking over 20 years, so she has experience.
Yeah.
She knows that her real gun is on her dominant side. Right. She knows that the taser is a whole different color than her real gun. And she's also had a past. In case our soulmates don't remember, we talk about no charges were brought against the police officers for the fatal shooting of Kobe Heisler. This goes back to where they were called for a domestic assault charge, and he lunged at a knife. Now, here's a man that has autism. All right, but they did not know how to handle the situation, right? But when she showed up on the scene, what did she tell the officers to do? Turn off their body cam, get in separate cars, don't talk to each other, walk away from the scene now. So she knows how to get out of these situations. And I say all that because, yeah, she was screaming taser, taser, but just as we saw the gun on the video off her body cam, she had to have a visual of that gun and see what color it was, right?
Yeah.
So you cannot call this an accident.
It's not an accident. No, it's not even close to an accident, Romeo. You know, I'm really happy that Kim Potter resigned.
Potter.
Potter, not Kim Porter. Excuse me, Kim Potter. I'm happy that she resigned, as well as the police chief, because you know, you think about what happened with George Floyd and how we would have. This is what we wanted to happen. This is what we wanted Chauvin to do. To be like, you know what, you messed up here, big time. Yeah. Just leave. You made a mistake. Just leave. But also, I want to add in here. So a lot of people online have been talking about why did Dante run? Everyone's been trying to figure out, like, well, why did he run? Why did he get back in the car? His parents got on GMA today, and they said, I know my son was scared. He was afraid of the police, but they also added, I don't know why it escalated, and it should have never escalated the way that it did. And that's the reality of it. Like, we can talk about what could have, should have, would have, went different ways, but at the end of the day, we cannot bring that life back. And as much as many protests we do, we can't bring them back.
No, and it goes back also to training. Police training, because police are trained for this particular situation.
Absolutely.
We've seen many videos where people who are not of color that have gotten back into their car, assaulted a police officer, and managed to get away, and they're not shot in the back. They're, you know what I'm saying? They're not with a knee on their neck until they take their last breath.
Absolutely.
So the problem is, it goes back to training with the police department, as well as, look, at the end of the day, there's a lot of racism out there when it comes to that.
Yeah,
really.
And I mean, you shouldn't expect to die when you get pulled over by police. You shouldn't be afraid that you're gonna fear for your life when you get pulled over. So a poll from Politico and Morning Consult shows that 44% of American voters say they're consuming a lot of news about the trial, while 33% say they're consuming just some news. Black voters and Hispanic voters and Democrats are more likely to be keeping up with the trial over other groups. Among those who are not keeping tabs on Chauvin's trial, 27% of Democrats and 18% of Republicans say they aren't following it because they don't expect for anything to change. While 35% of Democrats polled who are refraining altogether from watching the trial, they say they're doing so because it's emotionally upsetting. Similarly, 1 out of 4 Democrats not following the trial say their reason is that it's traumatizing, while 42% of Republicans say 14% of the Democrats who aren't following the trial, they say that they're doing that because, plain and simple, they're not interested. Romeo, I want to know what you think about this, because a lot of my friends are not watching the trial. A lot of my friends, they figure out what's going on for me, because we have to be knowledgeable about what's going on to deliver to our soulmates. But do you have any friends that are or are not watching the trial?
I have some friends that are watching it. More of them are watching, I will be honest, and they do say it affects them in a lot of ways. And they'll call and say, how do you guys do it at the Black Report? You have to intake this all day long so you can give us the news. It's one thing in taking an hour out of their day and watching FOXSOUL Black Report to get the information about it, but to have to absorb it throughout the whole day, it takes a toll on you, and you have to hear George Floyd pleading for his life over and over again. Even today, which we talk about that more with Sue Ann later on today. But at the end of the day, it is a lot to take in, and I do understand why some people don't watch it. You know, but some of that posts interesting where people say they're just not interested. When I see that, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How can you not be?
This is one of the most biggest cases of our time right now. Everyone should be watching this. even if you don't have a connection to it, even if you're not black, even if you've never been pulled over before, everyone should be watching this to see how corrupt or how much our justice system actually will work in a situation like this.
And that's true. And I know in the past, you know what I'm saying, I've been in this world for quite some time, so I know how people watch the Rodney King trial, the O.J. Simpson trial, and I know people have eyes on here. They may not say it totally, but I know that they do. All right, no classes will be held for the next 2 days at a school in Knoxville after a student was killed and a police officer injured during an encounter at the high school. Counselors will be available at Austin East Magnet High School Tuesday. Knox County Schools, the Superintendent Bob Thomas said during a press conference on Monday. Thomas said a decision about the rest of the week's classes will be made later. We're all devastated by the strategy, he said. The superintendent was speaking after a traumatic day in which officers responded to a call of a potentially armed person Monday afternoon and found the person in the school bathroom, Tennessee Bureau of Investigations Director David Ross said during the press conference. Ross said that officers ordered him out, but he refused and fired shots, prompting one officer to return fire. The gunman died at the scene, according to Ross. She was identified as a student at the school, but his name has not been released. Another sad day, and something I found surprising, within 4 months already of this year, there's 5 relating shootings at this school. When you think about in 2021, there's over 103 mass shootings already. So as the country starts to open back up after the pandemic, we're back to kind of where we started with these shootings, and that's hard to take.
I agree, but Romeo, you have a son, and I always like to, reiterate that. How does it feel being a father? Because I don't have children, so like I can say a million times like, oh, I would homeschool, but that's expensive, and the average person doesn't have the money to really homeschool their child. You as a father, how does it feel sending your son to school knowing that things like this are just happening across the world?
Sometimes as a father, I don't want my kid to grow up. You know, I'm scared of him one day being able to drive, what he may encounter if he does get pulled over by a police officer. We talk about going back to school right now. We don't want that to happen right now due to the pandemic, so we want him to wait till the fall. But yeah, I am concerned. I am very, very concerned about that. That's why I made sure wherever I live, it's really, really close to the school. I'm talking like a minute away in the car.
Okay, so you can just hop up and run, hop on the bike. Get right to it.
And one thing I want to say real quick before we go, the TBI said in Knoxville, Tennessee, they did say that this wasn't a school shooting. This was an officer-involved shooting inside the school.
Okay.
I don't know if I want to really take that in like that.
Yeah.
Because if they wouldn't have stopped this child or this teenager, who knows what would have happened inside the school that day.
So a student brought a gun into the school.
Yes.
Where were the... What is it called? What is it called?
Yeah.
The
The metal detectors?
Yes, the metal detectors.
I don't think this school had that. Though.
Okay. Look, I'm just like, what? I just know the shape. Okay. Yeah.